Robert Kegan's theory of adult development in English, please. Well, I'm Jay Barbuto, and I'm here to talk to you about Kegan's stages of development. A lot of you have communicated to me and said that this is one of the most challenging concepts to learn, so I thought this would be a good program to provide a little bit of a primer or an overview of the stages of development that Kegan writes about. So for the next 7 or 8 minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to provide Kegan's stages of adult development. Here is the table, and what I'll do is I'll go through each table, and each table helps to show the transition that occurs in a person's ego or cognitive development. The first order of Kegan's stages is called the impulsive stage. The impulsive stage is all about impulses. Here a person is not actually able to think about what they're doing. All they really know is what their impulses or what their instincts cause them to do. So they can't control impulses. They cry if they're hungry. They have no means of asking for what they actually want. This stage of development really does not occur, or not typically occur, with adults. So we won't spend much time on this stage of development. Here, essentially, nothing is subject and nothing is object, except the person's impulses control everything that they do. Remember, there's this concept of subject and object, and so throughout this video, I'm going to be talking about what is subject and what is object. I want to make sure we're clear on what that distinction really means. Something is subject when it controls who we are. It defines who we are. We're not able to separate ourselves from it. That's when something is subject. When something is object, this means that we're able to separate ourselves from this characteristic. We're able to separate ourselves from these things and make decisions while considering what's object, but not being completely controlled by what's object, if that makes sense. Think of it as when something is subject to you, it has you. When something is object to you, you have it. So that's the distinction between subject and object. The next stage in the development is the second order transition. And in the second order, this is what Kegan calls Imperial stage of development. In the Imperial stage of development, it's about data. It's about cause and effect. And interpersonal is all about kind of a reciprocal arrangement. It's kind of a trading of favors or a trading of what's happening. It's a tit for tat. What consumes us when we're in this stage, what is subject, what we're not able to separate ourselves from, are these notions of what we want and what we need to do to get it. We're not able to separate ourselves from what we want and what we need to do to get what we want. And so people, relationships are all viewed in terms of what we want and what we want to get from this relationship, what we want to get from this working relationship, what we want to get from this social relationship, what we want to get from this situation. And so when we're in level 2, what we're focused entirely on is getting what we want and doing whatever it takes to get what we want. However, what's object to us when we're in this second order, what's object to us, what we're able to actually separate are our actual impulses, because at this point we're able to control our impulses and we're able to say, you know what, I know I want this, I want to take this, I want to have this, but I understand that there's a price and I understand that there's consequences. Once we realize there are consequences, once we realize there's a price to be paid, once we realize that there are means to getting what we want, that's when we enter into this notion of stage 2 of development, the imperial stage of development. The third order is what we call, well, it's been called a lot of things. We call it traditionalism. It's been also called interpersonalism. I would say we call it either one. But level 3 is a stage of transition that's past level 2. What used to be subject to us at level 2 is now object to us, meaning that what we want and what we have to do to get it, that used to consume us at level 2. But at level 3, it doesn't consume us. We're able to think about what we want and what we have to do to get what we want. And we're able to hold it out. We're able to hold it out separate from ourselves and think about what we want and what we need to do for it and what we need what the consequences are likely to be. And we're able to consider it amongst other things. But what does consume us when we're in this third order of transition, what makes us tick, what drives all of our thinking, how we derive meaning in our lives when we're in level 3, is through inference and generalization and hypothesis and ideals and values. And usually what this means is that we get our identity and we get our belief system and we get our morals and we get what we know to be true. We get it from some forms of reference. It's what I was taught by my parents. It's what I learned in school. It's what I read in the article. It's what the experts say. When we base our knowledge, when we base our views, when we base our opinions on the opinions of others, on what the book said, on what the theory says, on what our parents taught us, on what the government says, or what society says, anytime we're conforming to a rule or conforming to a judgment or using a referent focus or a learned role to help define who we are or what we're doing, that is indicative. That is a symptom. That tells us that we're operating in the third order of transition. It tells us our third order is what we call running. And our third order is running when we focus our views on what other people think, on what people we love think, on what people who we maybe don't even know think. But authority and information and knowledge and even who we are as a person, much of that will come from external sources, external information, external standards. I know it because this test, which I scored well in, demonstrates I know it, so therefore I know it. That's level 3 thinking. I know it because this is what the book said, and I'm saying what the book said. That's level 3 thinking. I know it because this person is an expert, and they've said it, and now I've learned it. That's level 3 thinking. So let's move to the fourth order of Kegan's stages of development. Now, the fourth order of Kegan's stages is an interesting one. The ideology here is about formulation, authorization, relationships between abstractions, relationship regulating forms, multiple role consciousness. What is all this? It's in another language. So let's talk about what level 4 is in our own kind of in a more understandable way. When we were in the previous stage at level 3, we thought everything mattered through authority, through reference, through what others thought, what the standards are, what tests say, what our education tells us. And that kind of governed who we were. And we weren't able to separate ourselves from the authority, from the reference, from the information, from the role that we're playing. When we reach level 4, we're for the first time in our lives able to really define who we are without being defined by other people. We're not defined by others, but rather we can consider the view of others. We can consider what the experts say. We can consider what the book says. We can consider what the research tells us or what our parents might have taught us growing up. We can consider all of these things, but who we are, what makes us tick, what makes things really become real to us, becomes an individual thing. We're able to consider the needs and wishes of other people. We're able to consider the role that society would have us play, the role that others would have us play, the standard, the authority. But who we are is something that we still can negotiate, because At level 4, it's about identity, it's about autonomy, it's about individualization. And so when we get to this level 4, we start to author who we are. Once we author who we are, at level 4, this is what consumes us. So we're consumed by who we are. This is the kind of person that I am. This is what I stand for as a person. And this becomes our authorship. This becomes who we are, our own self-standard. And we become consumed by this. We're no longer consumed by the previous stage, which was the interpersonal or the level 3 stuff. Now all of those level 3 stuff we can hold object. But what's subject to us, what has us, is our own identity. And we can't separate our own identity from a situation and our own viewpoints from a situation. When we hit 5th order, and most of us never do, but when we hit 5th order, we now start to see problems with our own identity. See, level 4 is about defining who we are and understanding what makes us tick and understanding what we're about as a person, as separate from what society would have us be or as separate from what the standards or authority are. That's what level 4 is. When we get to level 5, this is when we suddenly can hold our identity of who we are and what we stand for. We can hold that object. So we're no longer a prisoner of our own identity. We no longer say, well, this is who I am, and that's all there is to it. Because that's level 4, kind of a level 4 position. When we hit level 5, we're able to see the nuances of life. We're able to see the complexities of life and how we need to expand who we are and become open to other possibilities. So when we hit level 5, what we're doing is we're reinventing ourselves. We're reinventing our identity because we understand that our identity is limited because the circumstances in our life will continuously change, and thus our identity will need to change with it. And so level 5 is the complex level of Kegan's stages of development. So I'm going to stop right here. You've gotten the real basics of Kegan's stages of development.